Hey everyone! Tonight we're starting with a text message, the kind that makes your heart drop before your eyes even finish reading it. I'm standing in my kitchen, still wearing my robe, tea gone cold on the counter, and this little glowing screen in my hand just burned straight through the last bit of hope I had left. You won't be joining us on the family cruise. Sam would prefer to keep it just family. That's what the message said. No punctuation, no warmth, just a casual gut punch from my son Brian, the same Brian I raised on my own after his father passed, the same Brian I gifted a fully paid house to just 6 months ago, the house I refinanced my retirement for, the house I painted, furnished, and filled with love. But apparently, I'm not family anymore, not family enough for a cabin on a cruise ship. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And while you're at it, drop your location and the time where you are. I want to know who's staying up late with me tonight. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. I just stared at that message. My thumb hovered for a moment before I typed the only reply I could manage. Okay. 1 word, 2 syllables. That's all it took to fold a decade of sacrifice into a neat little box and send it back across the void. I set the phone down carefully, almost like it could break from the weight of the silence that followed. I wasn't crying, not yet, but my insides felt like they were sinking into the floor tile. Like someone had poured wet cement around my ankles and told me to smile. The kitchen was quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, it's accusatory, and everywhere I looked, there was a reminder of them. The curtains, I sewed those for Sam. She wanted something boho but clean. The toaster, a wedding gift. The polished countertops, I paid for the upgrade. The floors, Brian couldn't afford them during the renovation. So I did what moms do, I stepped in. The irony is, I wasn't even invited to the renovation party they threw after the house was done. I remember Sam back then, standing in the entryway with her fake little laugh and her wine glass barely touched. "Oh, Helen, you didn't have to do all this." She said, "You'll always have a room here. You know that." I did know, or at least I thought I did. Now I'm not even good enough for a room on a ship. The text from Sam came 5 minutes after Brian's, as if she was the closer in some 1-2 punch. I hope you understand. It's just simpler this way. Simpler, isn't that a word? Simpler, now that I've handed over a whole house. Simpler, now that my name's off the mortgage and my retirement fund's been dipped into like a community candy jar. I didn't reply to her, I just sat there, hands folded in my lap like I was back in school, waiting for the principal to decide my punishment. But somewhere in that silence, something shifted. A part of me, the part that always made excuses, that always said it's fine, that always let things go, stood up and walked out of the room. And the woman who stayed behind, she was someone they weren't ready for. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 a.m., not because I couldn't sleep. I slept just fine, but because I needed to sit in the quiet before I spoke to anyone, before I told anyone what had happened. I made tea, strong, the way my late husband Richard used to make it when life got loud. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I called my best friend. Elaine answered before the second ring. "I'm coming over," she said. No hello, no preamble, just decades of friendship pouring through the receiver. She was there within 20 minutes, still in her house slippers, holding 2 croissants, and that look she gives me when she knows I'm trying to pretend something doesn't hurt. I didn't even speak. I just slid the phone across the kitchen table. She read the message and sat back slowly, her face unreadable for a second. Then she nodded, just once, like she'd known this was coming. They've been planning this, she said. My heart pinched. Maybe it's just Sam, I whispered. Maybe Brian doesn't even know. Elaine's lips flattened into a straight line. Helen, you gave them a house. I know. You paid off their debt. I know. You babysat their dog when they went to Aspen. I know. She leaned forward, pressing her hand to mine. You raised a kind man, but not a strong one. And that girl, she doesn't love you. Helen, she loves the convenience of you. The room was still. My tea was cold again. Elaine looked at me for a long time, then said the 5 words that changed everything. Have you checked your accounts lately? I blinked. What? She raised an eyebrow. Your bank accounts, your investments, the deed. Have you looked at anything since you signed the house over? I felt the edges of a nausea I hadn't noticed creeping in. No, I said, my voice barely above air. Sam takes care of all the household stuff, for tax reasons. She said it's just easier. Elaine didn't say anything for a moment. Then she sat back in her chair and crossed her arms like she was about to read someone for filth. Helen, we're checking today. Every account, every login. If anything's off, we're calling my cousin Franklin. Franklin Hayes, the attorney. The very one. I didn't protest. I couldn't, because deep down, some part of me already knew. My kindness had become their currency, and they'd been spending it like it was endless. Elaine didn't waste time. She pulled her laptop out of her tote bag and set it on the kitchen table like it was a scalpel, and I was her first surgery of the day. All right, she said, cracking her knuckles. Let's see what our dear Sam has been up to. I hesitated. My fingers hovered above the keyboard like they weren't mine. It felt like opening a door I'd boarded shut on purpose, but I typed in my email and logged into the online bankings. Elaine peered over her glasses like a hawk scanning a field. At first glance, everything looked normal. A few monthly debits utilities, a couple grocery stores, my usual donation to the Veterans Charity, but then we scrolled further. A string of transfers, small enough not to raise alarm. $600 here, $1, $200 there, all labeled as house repairs or garden upkeep. I frowned. I don't have a garden. Elaine's eyebrows shot up. No, don't. But Sam does, and that sure looks like a drip irrigation bill. We dug deeper. There was a second user on the account, not hidden but not exactly obvious either. A secondary debit card linked under my name, registered to their address. I stared at the screen like it was a foreign language. Elaine looked at me gently, but her voice didn't soften. Helen, she's been using your money, maybe for months, possibly longer. It didn't feel like rage. Not yet. It felt more like someone had taken a match to a blueprint of my life, and I was just watching it curl and blacken from the edges inward. Check the title, Elaine said next, her voice tighter now. Let's see if your name is still on the house. My hands were trembling as I navigated to the property portal. I typed in the address. I already knew what I'd find. But denial is funny. Like that, it makes you hope you're wrong. My name was gone. The deed had been transferred 6 weeks after I gave them the house, not to both of them, but to Sam, sole ownership. She did that without telling me, I whispered. Elaine let out a slow breath, and Brian must have known, I said, or let her do it. We sat in silence for a moment. I could feel my pulse beating in my ears, like someone tapping on the walls from the inside. There were no tears, just a cold clarity settling into my bones. Elaine reached over and took my hand. Listen, I know you. You're kind. You believe in giving, but giving doesn't mean you let them steal. I just wanted them to have a future, said, but not at the cost of yours. That's the thing. They never tell you about motherhood. Sometimes the very people you build your life around grow up thinking they're entitled to tear it apart brick by brick. I stood up suddenly. As if I needed to outrun the shame tightening in my chest, I walked to the sink and looked out the window. Past the bird feeder I refilled every Thursday. Past the mailbox that had only ever brought me grocery circulars and birthday cards from Walgreens. "You think I need a lawyer?" I asked. "I think you need a firewall," Elaine said, "and probably a forensic accountant." That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed thinking about all the nights I babysat their dogs so they could go to Napa, about how Sam always insisted on ordering for me when we went out to eat. "Helen doesn't like spicy." She'd say, like I was some kind of decoration. I remembered the Christmas they forgot to invite me to the Airbnb they rented in the mountains, the birthday dinner where Brian handed me a card that said, "Thanks for everything," always with nothing written inside. Maybe that should have been the sign. By morning, I was done waiting for another sign. I dug out the paperwork Sam had insisted I sign last year. I remember it vividly. Now she'd come over with a folder and a notary, said it was just standard paperwork for emergencies. I'd been tired that day, distracted, and trusting. Elaine was right. It was a power of attorney. Durable, sweeping, full control of my accounts, assets, even medical decisions in the event of incapacitation. Except I wasn't incapacitated. Not by a long shot. I flipped through the pages and noticed something else Sam had filled in, certain sections herself, neatly typed. I hadn't even seen those parts. They'd been under the signature page, and I foolishly hadn't read the fine print. "Don't worry, Helen," she had said. "We're just protecting you." But who protects the protector? That morning, Elaine and I drove to her cousin Franklin's law office. I hadn't seen him since her second wedding, but he greeted me like we were family. Elaine didn't waste time. Sam and Brian have been siphoning from Helen. We found proof. Franklin's face went still, not surprised, just resolved. "All right," he said. "Let's talk about how to stop this." And that's when something clicked in me. I'd spent my entire life giving without asking, saying yes without reading the terms, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. They wanted a quiet mom. They got one, but this time, she was carrying a very loud pen. We spent hours going over documents, pulling bank records, checking for unusual activity. Franklin made calls. He reached out to a financial investigator, someone who specialized in elder financial abuse. I felt my stomach twist at the phrase, elder. It sounded so clinical, so frail, but I didn't feel frail. I felt forged in fire. By the time we left the office, my shoulders ached and my head buzzed with numbers, but I was more certain than ever. I walked out into the afternoon sun, took a deep breath, and said to Elaine, "I'm going to take everything back." She didn't smile. She nodded. Because she knew I wasn't talking about money. I was talking about my voice. My life. My name. Hey everyone. Tonight we're standing at a cliff's edge. Not a literal one, but the kind where everything you thought was solid suddenly crumbles beneath your feet. You ever open your front door and feel like someone rearranged your whole life while you were sleeping? Well, buckle in. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And let me know in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is it where you are? Now, turn off the lights. Maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise. And let's begin tonight's journey together. Franklin's office smelled faintly of wood polish and worn leather, that classic old book kind of place. The kind that feels like it remembers everything you say, even the stuff you whisper to yourself. I sat there, sipping lukewarm coffee while Franklin flipped through the file labeled Gardner Power of Attorney Review. I'm not going to lie to you, Helen. He said, undoing this kind of thing takes patience. But what you've got going for you is clarity and evidence. Clarity, I repeated, rolling the word around in my mouth like a piece of hard candy. Took me long enough to find it. You found it in time, he said, and that's what matters. Now, here's a quirky little fact you probably didn't expect to hear in a story like this. More than 60% of elder financial abuse cases are committed by family members, not scammers in faraway places, not hackers, family, sons, daughters, in-laws, people you once packed lunch for and kissed goodnight. Willed. Right. Franklin leaned across the desk. The signature on your POA looks shaky. A handwriting analyst could help us prove you were either misled or manipulated. I didn't even know there were handwriting experts anymore. I said, a touch of sarcasm curling my voice. They exist, he said. They're like forensic magicians for paperwork. Old age wisdom tells you something real simple if you wouldn't let someone drive your car blindfolded. Don't let them drive your life on charm alone. I let Sam do both. Franklin walked me through our first moves: revoke the existing POA, file a legal block to freeze any transactions initiated by Sam. And here's the part that twisted my gut: launch a formal financial investigation through a private third-party analyst. People like Sam, Franklin said gently, they don't stop until you make them stop. I left his office feeling strange, part deflated, part dangerous. It was like realizing you'd been holding your breath for 5 years and finally decided to exhale. That evening, back at my place, the sun filtered through the curtains in a soft orange haze. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt like a spotlight, catching every scratch on the floor, every worn edge on the furniture I used to be proud of. I opened a kitchen drawer and pulled out the family photo album. I hadn't looked at it in a while. There was Brian, gap-toothed at 5, holding a turtle he'd found in the backyard. There was Sam, laughing in a white sundress, holding a wine glass at their engagement party. I stared at the picture until my eyes blurred. And then I said out loud, you two don't get to live in my happy memories if you're trying to erase my future. I tore the photo from the sleeve. Not with violence, just a slow, steady rip. I didn't throw it away. I just folded it and slid it into an envelope marked evidence. I was done grieving. It was time to document. The next morning, I took Franklin's advice and made copies of every financial document Sam had ever touched. Utility bills, property tax payments, fund transfers, everything. Elaine helped me color code them with sticky tabs. See? You're building your armor, she said. I'm not going into battle, I told her, but we both knew I was lying. 2 days later, I got the call. It was from Martin Lane, the investigator Franklin had hired. Miss Gardner, he asked, his voice crisp but polite. We've already flagged something. My heart did that weird fluttering thing it always does when your stomach knows bad news is coming before your brain does. There's been a second mortgage inquiry on your property, he said. My voice caught. I didn't authorize that. No, he said, but the bank was approached by a woman using the current deed under Samuel Gardner's name. She claimed full ownership. She's trying to take out a $180,000 line of credit. I closed my eyes. Sam was mortgaging the house I bought. While I was making her dinner and rubbing her back during her pregnancy, she was making plans to cash out my kindness. I need everything you have, I said calmly. Already in motion, he assured me. That night, I found myself standing in front of the fireplace. There was a stack of old birthday cards on the mantel, cards Sam had signed with hearts and little smiley faces. You'd think that would hurt. It didn't. It felt like reading fictions, My hands didn't shake when I pulled them down, one by one. I placed them in a manila folder and labeled it Old Chapter. The next day, Martin emailed me the proof application copies, forged e-signatures, a note where Sam had listed me as elderly but fully cooperative. I was neither of those things, not anymore. Elaine and I sat at her kitchen table. Mine was too full of legal files now, and we reviewed every piece together. "You're going to stop her," Elaine said. She stopped herself. I replied. She just didn't realize it. Here's a fun little fact. For those of you playing along at home under federal law, a power of attorney is void the moment it's proven to be misused. And misused, it had been in writing, in deed, and in bank code. That night, I had tea, hot lemon and ginger. I sat under a fleece blanket and read the final draft Franklin had sent over. Everything was in it. POA revocation, fraud claims, asset freezes, even the preliminary filings to reclaim the house title. And then, as if the universe needed to add a little spice, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sam. "Hey, just checking in. Need you to sign the forms I left on the kitchen counter. Won't take long, just a few technicalities for the cruise paperwork. Tex." I stared at it, the glow of the screen cold and arrogant. She didn't know. She thought I was still asleep. I smiled. That was the last time she'd ever underestimate me. The forms she left on the counter were nestled inside a pale blue folders, neat, unassuming, just like Sam. The sticky note on top was her usual tone, cheerful with a hint of control, just sign where highlighted. Mama H, makes the vacation stuff easier. Go Sam. I didn't open it right away. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, staring at it like it might hiss or bite, because in a way, it already had. Elaine was sitting at my dining table with a cup of coffee when I picked it up. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that the folder?" "Oh, yeah," I said, the final nail in the coffin folder. We opened it together. Power of attorney again, permanent, irrevocable, medical authority, financial control, property decisions, the whole symphony of theft, dressed up in smooth legalese and pastel highlights. This wasn't about the cruise. It wasn't even about money anymore. This was Sam trying to take my voice, my choices, my very ability to say no. And I almost signed it. If things had been a little quieter in my mind, if Elaine hadn't been here, I might have. "I'm going to frame it," I said softly. Elaine blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" "Not hang it. Just keep it. As a reminder, the day I decided to stop being the soft one." She smiled over her mug. "You've always had steel in you, Helen. It just took betrayal to find it." And you know what? She was right. Old age wisdom tells us softness doesn't mean surrender. A pillow can smother just fine when you stop fluffing it. I took photos of the folder, every page, every highlight. I uploaded them to a cloud drive that only I could access. Then I called Franklin. He answered on the second ring. "What's she trying now?" She just handed me her blueprint. I said, signed in ink and sticky notes. Franklin exhaled, then chuckled softly. "Beautiful. We'll add it to the portfolio." That's when I told him my next move. "I want to sell the house," I said, calm and clear. He paused. "The one you're living in?" "No, the one I gifted them, the one she thinks is still hers. Helen," he said slowly, "that property was signed over." "To me again," I interrupted. "We filed the reversal last week. She doesn't know it's done, and I already have a buyer." Franklin whistled softly. "You don't just play defense, do you?" "Not anymore." Here's a quirky fact in the U.S. A real estate transaction can go through in under 10 days if both parties are ready and the title is clear. And thanks to my earlier steps, thank you. Franklin, the title, was squeaky clean. The buyer was a lovely young couple named Jonah and Erica, first-time homebuyers. They'd been turned down by 2 sellers already. And when they saw my listing priced fairly, no games, they sent a heartfelt letter that nearly made me cry, the kind of couple that reminded me what a home is supposed to mean. We closed in 8 days. By the time Sam and Brian docked from their cruise, smiling and tanned, the house they thought they were coming home to was already someone else's dream. I kept everything quiet. No texts, no calls. I let the silence speak. On the 9th morning, I parked across the street in my old sedan, engine off. Watching from a shaded lot, Elaine sat in the passenger seat, sipping a smoothie like we were front row at a play. Sam stepped out of the Uber first, wide-brimmed hat, designer sunglasses. She looked like the cover of Vacation Monthly. Brian followed, yawning and scrolling through his phone. They didn't notice the new locks until the 3rd bag of luggage hit the front porch. The sign in the yard read, "Welcome home, Jonah and Erica." Elaine leaned toward the window. There it is, the realizations. Brian turned first, slowly, like maybe he was dreaming. Then Sam, her jaw moved but no sound came out. I got out of the car. Sam's eyes landed on me. "What is this?" "Your new neighbors," I said, nodding toward the house. "They're lovely people, very polite." Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish trying to form a threat. "You can't sell it," she hissed. "You don't have the—" "I do," I said quietly. "I have all of it." Brian stepped forward. "Mom, you didn't tell us." "No, I cut in. You didn't ask." Old age wisdom. Round 2 people who don't ask questions when they're taking something will never apologize when they're caught. Sam's voice cracked. Desperate now. "We already took out a loan against this house. We told the bank it was ours." "Well," I said, tilting my head, "you lied. Better start working on a plan B." That's when I handed her the folder. Not the power of attorney papers, oh no. This was the full report. Every withdrawal she'd made. Every debt she racked up under my name. Every forged document. Her hand shook as she flipped through it. You spied on me." I shrugged. "I documented. You just made it easy." Brian was pale now. His voice wobbled. "Why didn't you just talk to us?" I looked at him, really looked at him. My son, the boy I raised on bedtime stories and Band-Aids, the man who stood beside the woman trying to erase me. "I did," I said. "You just stopped listening." Sam dropped the folder on the porch like it burned her. "We'll sue," she whispered. "You'll lose," I said. She stepped forward like she might scream, or lunge, or spit some last venom. But Elaine got out of the car then, quiet, calm, a force in her own right. "I wouldn't," she said simply. And just like that, they backed off. The car ride home was quiet. Elaine didn't say anything until we reached my driveway. "You okay?" "I'm not sure," I said, "but I'm not afraid anymore." She reached over and squeezed my hand. That's more than enough. The next morning, the sun filtered through my curtains like it always did, but something was different. I sat at the breakfast table, holding my favorite mug chipped on the rim. Floral pattern faded from years of dishwashing. It felt good in my hands, familiar, real. I stared at the steam rising from my coffee and whispered, "They really thought they had me." And for a long time, they did. That's the thing about long-term trust. It turns into habit. You trust. Even when you shouldn't, you give. Even when there's nothing left in your cup, you listen. Even when the words start to feel like rehearsed lines. But silence watches, and mine had been keeping score. I opened my laptop and pulled up the cloud drive, the photos of the fake power of attorney, the financial records, the forged withdrawals, the text messages. Everything was neatly filed into folders with cheerful little names like What Sam Forgot and Brian's Blind Spots. A digital museum of betrayal. And still, no apology. No phone call, no email, not even a passive-aggressive emoji from Sam. They were waiting, watching, probably scrambling. Elaine called around noon. "How's it feel?" she asked. "Like I took off a coat that had been weighing 200 pounds. I replied, and found a $100 bill in the pocket. She laughed. "They'll try something else. You know that." "I know," I said. "That's why we're not done yet." Old age wisdom again. The first swing isn't always the final blow, but it does tell you who your real opponents are. Later that afternoon, Franklin came by. He had a manila folder in hand and a look that could only be described as grim satisfaction. "They tried to file an injunction," he said as he stepped inside. I raised an eyebrow, already. He handed me the paperwork, filed at 9:02 this morning. Claims the property sale was fraudulent, that you acted under duress, that you were manipulated by, get this, a third party with malicious intent. He didn't even have to say it. That third party was Elaine. I rolled my eyes. I guess she's a criminal now. I'll let her know. "They're desperate," Franklin said, settling into the armchair across from me, "which means they know it's over, but they still want to drag you through the mud." "Well," I said, flipping through the pages, "then I guess it's time to pull the rug out entirely." He leaned forward. "You have something else planned." I smiled. "I've been thinking about my will." He blinked. "You already updated it. Sam and Brian are removed. The charities, the shelter, the scholarship fund, it's all set." "I know," I said, "but I want to make one more change, one more clause." Franklin listened as I explained. "See, I didn't just want to leave behind money. I wanted to leave a message." So we drafted a final page, one that would sit in the very back of my will, waiting for the day it was read aloud. It began with a letter. To those who believed I was too quiet to notice. To those who mistook generosity for weakness. To those who assumed my love had no limits. It went on, paragraph after paragraph. Not angry, not petty, just precise. And at the end, I added a line that made Franklin chuckle aloud. "If you're hearing this, it means the silence you once relied on has outlived your illusions." I signed it. Then I added a small clause one that donated a portion of my estate to a national elder fraud prevention organization under Sam's name. A public donation, a tax-recorded gift, a digital monument to the woman who thought she could erase me. Franklin tapped the pen against the folder. "Poetic," he said. "Poetry," I replied, "is just truth dressed in rhythm." That night, I slept better than I had in months. But it wasn't over yet, because 2 days later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I stared at it for a moment, then answered. "Helen speaking." A pause, then his voice. "Mom." I didn't say anything. "It's me, Brian." Still nothing. He cleared his throat. We just got back. I saw the house, the documents, everything. Sam is not doing well." I almost laughed. Not doing well, like this was the flu. "I didn't know about the power of attorney," he said quickly. "I swear, she told me it was a backup in case anything happened to you." "And the credit cards," I asked, my voice flat. "The bank transfers, the second mortgage." He was silent for a second too long. I thought it was temporary. There it was, that familiar shrug of accountability, that cowardice dressed up as confusion. She said you were fine with it, that you knew about everything, and you didn't say anything. So, "So you assumed," I said, "because I was quiet." He didn't answer. "I saw what you did. Brian, I saw the withdrawals, the forged approvals, the house listing, the files Sam left on my counter while you were drinking cocktails on the ocean." "I didn't sign anything," he whispered. "No," I said. "You just stood by." A long pause. Can we talk in person?" "No." "But I'm your son." "And I was your mother," I replied, but I guess we're both learning what those words actually mean. Another long pause. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I think I messed up. Finally." But it was too late. I hung up. And you know what? I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. I didn't rush to fix it. That reflex, the one where mothers scramble to keep their children afloat, even while drowning themselves, that reflex was gone. I turned off the phone and stared out the window. The world looked the same, but I didn't. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling across the hardwood floor, golden, unbothered, like it had no idea what chaos was brewing inside my phone. I didn't check it. I made tea, I watered the plants, I folded a towel and put it exactly where it belonged. And only then, only after I reminded myself that peace didn't need permission, did I glance at the screen. 7 misdeed calls, 5 voicemails, 2 text messages. All from Brian. I opened the last one. "Mom, please, I know we messed up, but Sam's pregnant. We need help. Please don't shut us out completely. Eat." There it was, the final card. The baby card. The one that was supposed to override every betrayal, wipe the slate clean, make me forget everything they'd done. Pregnancy, the ultimate emotional trump card in family betrayal. I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I typed one word, "Congratulations," and nothing else. I set the phone down and walked away. It buzzed again, and I didn't even look, because here's something I've learned in 66 years of life. Guilt is a costume. You can wear it when the lights are on, when the show needs sympathy, but true remorse. That's what you wear when no one's watching, and I had no reason to believe Brian or Sam even owned that outfit. Later that day, Elaine came by with a small wrapped box. "What's this?" I asked, lifting an eyebrow. "Something I've been saving," she said. "Open it." Inside was a tiny ceramic duck. It was hideous, in the best possible way, yellow with a chipped beak and eyes that looked permanently surprised. I laughed out loud. "This is what you've been saving. You used to have one just like it in your kitchen window in college," she said. "You called it quackery." "Oh my God," I whispered. "I forgot about quackery." "Well, I didn't," she smiled. "Thought it might be time you had something completely yours again." I set it in the windowsill, right where the sun would catch it. Small joys, that's what I was building my new life on. And small safeguards, too. That afternoon, I met Franklin at the courthouse again. The paperwork had all gone through. Every financial lock was in place. The house was sold. The funds were protected in a trust. The legal record was pristine. But I had one more task. "Have you prepared the formal cease and desist?" I asked. Franklin nodded and handed me the folder. "This is the final piece. It warns both Sam and Brian that any continued attempts at contact, financial or personal, will be regarded as harassment and will be handled accordingly." I held the papers in my hands for a moment. There was something so final about them. Not angry, not vindictive, just done? "I want to add something," I said. He looked up. "What's that?" "A sentence," I said, "just one line." He slid the papers back across the table. I picked up the pen and wrote at the very bottom. "You mistook my silence for absence. I was never gone. I was watching. Franklin read it and nodded once. Powerful. He said, "Quiet," I replied, "but powerful." As I left the courthouse, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. I looked older. Yes, but not diminished. In fact, for the first time in years, I looked like a woman who belonged entirely to herself. That night, I went through my photo albums. Not the digital ones, those were full of cropped smiles and staged vacations. I wanted the real ones, the dog-eared books filled with snapshots from when Brian was small, when Richard and I still believed we were building a legacy, not a liability. I ran my fingers across a picture of Brian at age 7, holding a toy fire truck with both hands, his face glowing. I didn't cry, but I did talk to him. "I loved you more than anything," I whispered, "but you grew into someone I don't recognize, and I don't owe that person anything." I slipped the photo back into the album and closed it gently. I wasn't erasing my past. I was just deciding where it ended. The next morning, I received a letter from the shelter Benton County Animal Rescue, the same one Richard used to donate to every Christmas. "Dear Mrs. Gardner," it began, "we wanted to personally thank you for your generous donation made in your son's name. Your support means so much to our animals, and your story inspired our whole team." I chuckled. Sam must have loved seeing that show up in the mail. That's the thing about poetic justice, it doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives in a thank you card from a kitten rescue, addressed to the person who tried to erase you. Franklin called that afternoon, "How's it feel to have a paper trail thicker than a novel?" Like I finally wrote the ending. I said, "You're not worried they'll retaliate?" "No," I said, "because I haven't left any doors open." A pause. "Also," I added, "I booked a trip." His voice lifted. "Ooh, Paris," I said, "then Vienna, then maybe Florence. It's time I saw some of the beauty this world offers before I waste another second pretending I have to earn it." "You're leaving soon." 2 weeks. "Alone." "Yes." I smiled, "and that's the best part." He laughed softly. "You're the most terrifying client I've ever had." "Only to the guilty," I said. Later that night, I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, watching the sky bleed into dusk. A little ceramic duck sat on my windowsill, catching the last of the sunlight. I was free. 3 days before my flight to Paris, I received a voicemail. I hadn't heard Brian's voice in over a week, and I honestly didn't expect to. "Mom," his voice crackled through the speaker. Low, tired. "I know you're angry. I get it. But I just wanted to talk. That's all. Sam's not here right now. She's staying at her sister's. We've been arguing a lot. I don't know what I'm doing. I guess I miss you. I know you probably won't call back, but I wanted to say that." He hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't return the call. Instead, I sat with that message, letting the silence that followed do what it does best clarify. The truth is, if you crack open the door to remorse too early, all you're doing is giving someone another chance to walk all over you in a softer pair of shoes. No, thank you. That afternoon, Elaine came by with 2 suitcases she'd been storing in her garage, old but sturdy, the kind built for real travel. "We're really doing this," I told her, carefully zipping them open and placing them by the couch. "You're really doing this," she said, handing me a small list. "And don't forget the travel adapters this time. Paris runs on logic and voltage that doesn't care how American you are." We both laughed. There's something about laughter in your 60s, it lands differently. It's not to impress anyone, or hide nerves, or fill space. It's just real, and rare, and full-bodied. Over dinner that night, roasted salmon, asparagus, 2 glasses of wine, I finally told Elaine everything. All of it. From the house to the accounts to the ceramic duck. She didn't interrupt, just listened, refilling my wine once and handing me a napkin when she saw my fingers tremble. "You didn't just survive them," she said when I was finished. "You outmaneuvered them." I shook my head. "It doesn't feel like a win." "Because you're still grieving," she said. "Grieving the son you raised, the future you pictured, but it's okay to grieve and still walk away." Later that evening, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me. It had belonged to Richard. He installed it himself in the summer of '98 and grumbled about it every year since. It wobbled slightly on its lowest setting. I loved that. Before falling asleep, I pulled out a small notebook and scribbled down a few lines of what I wanted my trip to be, not just the places, but the feelings. Lightness. Laughter. No apologies. Coffee in bed. Saying no without guilt. Saying yes without fear. I closed the book and placed it by the bed. Across town, I imagined Sam and Brian were feeling the edges of their carefully crafted world collapse in on them, and I didn't wish them harm. I just didn't care to be their cushion anymore. The next morning, I called Dalton one last time. "Just confirming," I said. "The house reversal is irreversible, correct?" He chuckled. "Olivia, it would take a team of 12 attorneys, 3 notaries, and a confession from you under oath to undo what we've done." "Perfect," I said. "You okay?" I really am." That afternoon, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue sauce, July's signature scent. Kids zipped by on scooters. A teenager with headphones nodded to me politely as he passed. I stopped at a little thrift shop tucked between the grocery store and a bakery and found an old map of Europe, folded neatly behind a stack of dusty postcards. I bought it on impulse. That night, I spread it across the kitchen table and circled the cities I wanted to see: Paris, Vienna, Florence, Prague, Lisbon. Each circle felt like a promise. I traced the line from one place to the next and whispered, "You'll never control this again." The next morning was quiet. I made eggs. I drank my tea. I looked out the window and watched a neighbor watering her flowers. There was a knock at the doors. I froze. Nobody knocks anymore, not unless it's a delivery or trouble. I opened it slowly. It was Brian. His eyes were bloodshot. His shoulders slumped like a man twice his age. He looked small. "Mom," he said, "can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. I looked past him, no car parked nearby, no Sam. "I'm leaving for Paris in 2 days." I said, "You have 5 minutes." He nodded quickly and stepped inside. Awkward, like he didn't recognize the place anymore. He didn't, because this wasn't his place, not anymore. He sat on the edge of the couch, twisting his hands together. I wanted to say sorry, really sorry, for what I asked. He looked up, startled. "You need to say what you're sorry for," I said. "Otherwise, it's just noise." His mouth opened and closed. Then, for letting her talk me into things, for not paying attention, for choosing comfort over truth. I nodded slowly. "That's a start." He looked up again, desperate. "Do you think maybe when you get back from your trip, we could talk more? Try again?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You were my greatest joy," I said, "and you became my greatest lesson." He looked away. "When I return," I said softly, "we'll see if there's a new path, but it won't be one where I pretend nothing happened. You'll walk toward me, not with guilt, but with work. He nodded slowly. Okay. Then he stood, said goodbye, and walked out the door. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. Some things just take time. And I was finally giving myself all the time I needed. The morning of my flight, I woke up before dawn. There's something sacred about 4 a.m. Quiet like that doesn't exist during daylight. No lawnmowers, no mail trucks, just the low hum of your own breath and the realization that you're about to start something entirely new. I took one last look around the apartment. Everything was in order. My suitcase stood upright by the door like a polite travel companion, zipped and tagged. Elaine had insisted on buying me one of those bright orange luggage tags so I wouldn't accidentally walk off with someone else's bag and start a whole different life. She wasn't entirely wrong. My passport lay on the kitchen counter, exactly where I left it the night before, right next to my boarding pass and Richard's old watch. I slipped the watch into my carry-on. As I locked the door behind me, I didn't look back. Elaine met me at the curb in her bathrobe and slippers, her eyes bright with excitement. You're going to come back speaking French and judging my coffee. I laughed, only if your coffee deserves it. We hugged tight, and she whispered, take pictures, but more than that, take moments. At the airport, I moved through the motions like I'd done it 100 times security. Gate change, boarding zone. But the truth is, it had been years since I traveled, not since Richard passed, not since I made everyone else's comfort my full-time job. I found my seat by the window, tucked into the back of the plane. A young couple settled beside me, backpacks, earbuds, youth that still believed 10-hour flights were romantic. The plane took off, and as the wheels lifted from the ground, I whispered, let's see who I get to be now. Paris welcomed me with rain. Light, persistent rain that coated everything in silver and made the city feel like a watercolor painting come to life. I took a cab to my hotel in the Latin Quarter, a tiny place with creaky stairs and a balcony no bigger than a postage stamp. It was perfect. I spent that first afternoon walking aimlessly, letting the streets unfold like secrets. There's a strange magic in being anonymous. No one knew my name. No one knew my story. I wasn't Olivia Gardner, former mother-in-law, account holder, the fixer of things. I was just a woman in comfortable shoes holding an umbrella and staring too long at flower stalls. By day 3, I had a routine café crème at the corner cafe, a walk through Luxembourg Gardens, and dinner wherever the smell pulled me in. I didn't check my email. I didn't check the news. I didn't check in with Brian. Instead, I checked in with myself daily, hourly. What did I want? What made me feel alive? What didn't? Simple questions that once felt like luxuries now felt like requirements. On day 5, I met Thomas. He was sitting on a park bench sketching strangers badly. His nose was too big for his face, his hair too curly for the age he claimed, and he wore suspenders unironically. He saw me watching and gestured with a flourish. May I draw you? No, I said, but I'll sit. He smiled. Fair enough. We talked for 2 hours. Nothing deep, just little stories. He had once painted fake murals for a bakery in Nice. I once accidentally locked myself in a storage closet during a store renovation. You laugh easy, he said. I forgot how much I liked laughing. He didn't ask where I was from. He didn't ask if I had kids, and I didn't offer. That evening, back in my hotel room, I wrote a postcard to Elaine that said I didn't get drawn, but I did get seen. On the 8th day, I visited Père Lachaise Cemetery. I know, a little morbid, but something about walking among quiet stories lives that had already been lived. Names etched in stone made me feel less weighed down by my own grief. I stopped in front of Edith Piaf's grave, her name surrounded by fresh roses and little folded notes. Someone had left a single croissant, perfectly wrapped in wax paper. Paris, always dramatic. I stood there for a while and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me that I don't need to be young to be bold." Insight from old age wisdom, that was it. Right there. It's never too late to do something new. It's only too late when you stop believing you deserve it. By the time the final days of my trip arrived, I felt like my muscles had stretched in places that had long gone rigid. Not just physically, but emotionally. I had spent so much time bracing for betrayal, shrinking from confrontation, silencing myself out of politeness. But now, I was learning to occupy space again, to speak when I wanted, to rest without guilt, to laugh without checking if anyone else approved. On the last night, I stood on my balcony with a small glass of wine, listening to the city hum beneath me. A light breeze caught my hair, and for the first time in years, I didn't tuck it back or fix it. I let it blow wild. That night, I dreamed of the house, not the one I gave away, but the one I owned now, with my name on it, my breath in its walls, and my truth hanging on every nail. In the dream, I was in the kitchen. The shelf was still empty, but it wasn't sad. It was waiting. Coming home felt different this time. Not just because I had been away, but because I had changed while I was gone. I wasn't stepping back into my old life. I was returning as someone new, or maybe someone I'd always been, buried under decades of giving and forgiving. The taxi pulled up to my modest apartment just after sunset. I stepped out with my suitcase, still smelling faintly of lavender from the little sachets the hotel housekeeper had tucked into the drawers. The driver unloaded my bag, tipped his hat, and drove off. I stood there for a moment, letting the soft glow of the porch light hit my face. "Home," I whispered, but this time it felt like a declaration, not a resignation. Inside, everything was just as I left it: neat, quiet, peaceful. My answering machine blinked 3 times. I didn't rush to check it. Instead, I unpacked slowly, folded each item, stacked my postcards, set aside the sketches Thomas had gifted me with a wink and a "for your fridge." Eventually, I pressed play on the messages. Beep. "Hi, Mom. I just wanted to check in. We're back from the cruise. Can we talk?" That was Brian. His voice sounded tentative, like he was testing the waters. Beep. "Olivia." "It's Emily. I know things got tense, but we never meant to hurt you. Can we meet, maybe for coffee?" Beep. "Hey." "It's Elaine. Just checking to see if you landed. Can't wait to hear about your adventures. Let's catch up soon." Yeah. I deleted the first 2, saved the last. I knew it wouldn't be long before Brian or Emily tried to show up in person. The papers had been delivered, the accounts locked down, the house sold. By now, they were probably sitting in some borrowed condo, wondering how everything unraveled while they were away sipping champagne. Let them wonder. Let them sit with it. The next morning, I met Elaine at our usual coffee shop. She looked me over with a wide grin and gasped, "You look expensive." I laughed so hard I snorted. It's just the Paris humidity. We found our table by the window, and she leaned in like a detective sniffing out secrets. "So, tell me everything." I did, every little detail, not just the travel, but the transformation. How I stood in front of Piaf's grave and felt brave. How I let my hair blow wild. How I learned to walk again, not just on foreign sidewalks, but in my own skin. Elaine listened with tears in her eyes. "You sound like you found yourself again," she said softly. "Maybe I did," I replied, Or maybe I just stopped apologizing for being me. That afternoon, I returned to the store for the first time since the sale. It wasn't mine anymore. Not legally, but I had arranged a visit with the new owners. A young couple who had reached out hoping I could share some insight on the space's history. I stepped through the door and was met with that familiar scent, lemon cleaner, warm wood, the faint metallic hint of appliances. It was different. Yes, brighter, fresher, but somehow it still felt like home. Rachel and Nate, the new owners, greeted me with nervous excitement. "We hope you don't mind us keeping some of the original fixtures," Rachel said. "We felt like it carried your energy." I smiled. That energy was earned, and I'm glad you felt it. They walked me through their plans, adding a coffee bar, offering repair workshops for college students, maybe even hosting local events. "It's not just a store to us," Nate said. "We want it to feel like a heartbeat in the community." I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes, not sadness, gratitude. Before I left, I handed Rachel a small box. "These are the store's original keys," I said. "They're more symbolic now, but I thought you should have them." She took the box with reverence, like I'd handed her something sacred. On my way home, I took the long route, walking through streets I used to rush down. It's funny what you notice when you're not in a hurry. The neighbor's garden now bloomed with sunflowers. Someone had painted a mural on the side of the laundromat, bright blues and oranges. A woman's face in silhouette, her eyes closed like she was listening to music no one else could hear. I stopped and stared at that mural for a long time. Something about it made me feel deeply understood. At home, I found a new letter in the mailbox. No return address. I recognized Brian's handwriting immediately. I opened it on the porch, letting the breeze catch the edges of the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no salutation, no sign-off. Just, "I know you think I chose her over you, and maybe I did, but I didn't know how to stand between the two of you. I thought staying quiet was the best way to keep the peace. I see now that silence is a choice, too. I'm sorry." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't cry, not this time. Instead, I whispered, "Let that be the beginning of something, not just the end." There's a phrase I once read, "Sometimes the bridge you burn lights the way." I used to think burning bridges was reckless. Now I know it depends on what's on the other side. Sometimes, the other side is a trap dressed up like a future's. And sometimes, you have to walk through that fire to reach something true. Something like peace. Something like yourself. I never thought I'd say this, but waking up with no plan, no emails, no calls, no errands for anyone but myself was beautiful. That morning, I made tea in silence. Not the kind of silence you resent, but the kind you earn. I stirred honey into my cup slowly, just listening to the birds squabble outside my window. No one was texting. No one needed me. And for once, I didn't need anyone either. Then came the knock on the doors. Not loud, not aggressive, but purposeful. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Brian stood there, in jeans and a wrinkled flannel, holding a bag of pastries like a peace offering from a nervous bakery god. His eyes, usually unreadable behind a phone screen or wife's approval, looked exposed, humans. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside without a word, letting him in. He moved like he didn't know where to sit, like the furniture might yell at him. I gestured toward the table, and he took the same seat he used to sit in as a teenager, eating cereal before school, pretending not to need me. We sat in silence for a moment, then he pushed the bag toward me. "Your favorite blueberry scones. I raised an eyebrow. Are you sure they're not Emily's favorite? He flinched. Not dramatic, just enough. No, he said, yours, I remembers. I unwrapped the scone slowly, keeping my expression neutral. The truth was, I didn't feel anger, not like I expected, just distance, like looking at a version of him from far away, through glass. Brian took a breath. I read everything, the documents, the reversal, the investigator's report. And I asked, breaking the scone in half. And you were right, he said, about all of it. I sipped my tea. That's not enough. I know. He rubbed his hands over his face. I noticed how tired he looked, how different, or maybe how the same, just without the illusion. I let Emily twist things. I thought I was protecting you by staying out of it, by smoothing things over. But the truth is, I was protecting myself from confrontation, from guilt, from facing the fact that I'd let her steal from you, and worse, that I didn't stop her. I looked at him then, really looked, the way I used to when he was a boy with scraped knees, trying to lie about how it happened. And just like then, I could tell he was telling the truth, but truth doesn't equal forgiveness, not automatically. I trusted you, I said, voice calm, more than anyone. And you used that trust to stay comfortable while someone else robbed me in plain sight. He nodded. I know. I leaned back. So what do you want from me now? Brian, an apology accepted a reset button. That's not how this works. I don't want anything, he said. Honestly, I just didn't want the last thing between us to be silence. That surprised me. He stood slowly, clearly ready to leave, but paused at the door. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. I see that now. I didn't reply. I just watched as he walked out, closing the door gently behind him. The moment he left, I felt the room shift, not with sadness, but release, like a breath I didn't realize I was holding finally let go. I didn't need to hold his guilt. That was his to carry. Later that week, I got a letter from the private investigator, the last page of the report. He traced all the accounts, untangled every financial knot Emily had tied in my name. The damage was extensive. Yes, but it was also done. I had everything I needed to make sure it wouldn't happen again. Dalton called the same afternoon. Olivia, he said, you're clear, legally. Financially, it's all settled. You're safe. Safe. That word used to feel boring, like a retirement plan or a good insurance policy. Now it felt radical, like freedom. I hung up and stood in front of my closet. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like dressing to impress or to be presentable for family. I wanted comfort. I pulled on my favorite oversized cardigan, soft from age, and slipped into shoes I could walk a mile in without thinking twice. Then I grabbed the little map I'd drawn months ago, back when this was all just a fantasy. A road trip, not overseas this time, not dramatic, just mine. Through the Blue Ridge Parkway, down to Asheville, a detour through small towns with diners that still served pie by the slice and waitresses who called you Hunt. I didn't tell anyone I was going, not even Elaine. Some things, I realized, don't need to be explained. By that evening, I was in a roadside motel just south of Roanoke. The air smelled like pine and cigarettes, and I loved it. I sat outside under the awning, listening to the buzz of insects and the occasional truck rumble past. A woman my age sat nearby. Flipping through a paperback mystery, she glanced at me over the rim of her glasses. Passing through, she asked, "Something like that." She smiled. "Me too, after my divorce." I said, "Screw it. Bought a van. Been driving ever since." "Good for you," I said. She tilted her head. "What are you running from?" I chuckled. "Not running, just reclaiming." She nodded like she understood that better than most. I slept like a child that night. No nightmares, no lists running through my head, just deep, unbroken rest. The next morning, I drove with the windows down, let the mountain air fill my lungs. I stopped when I felt like stopping, ate when I was hungry. No clocks, no schedules, no just checking in texts. It was glorious. At one point, I pulled over at an overlook. There was a view of rolling hills stretching like ocean waves, green and endless. I stood there alone, arms folded over the railing, wind in my hair. And I whispered, "Thank you," to myself, to life, to the part of me that didn't give up. You see, quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes it means watching, waiting, learning, and then choosing, at the exact right moment, to rise. I made it all the way to Asheville before I stopped for longer than a night. There was a little bed and breakfast tucked just off a cobbled street, the kind with lace curtains and creaky floors and coffee brewed stronger than judgment. The owner, a soft-spoken woman named Hazel, reminded me of a gentler version of myself. She asked no questions when I arrived, just handed me a key, pointed to the porch swing, and said, "If you're running from something, that's your business. If you're running to something, I hope you find it." That night, I sat on the porch with a blanket over my knees, rocking gently under the stars, sipping bourbon from a chipped mug I found in the cabinet. It tasted like freedom. And for the first time since all of it, the cruise, the betrayal, the paperwork, the confrontation, I allowed myself to feel proud, not just for protecting my assets or outmaneuvering Emily and Brian, but for surviving, for choosing myself. I thought of Richard again, my late husband, whose locket still hung from the lamp beside my bed. He would have been proud too, not just because I fought back, but because I did it with grace, with smarts, with that quiet edge he always said people underestimated in me. A part of me used to believe that wisdom only came from books, from titles, from professionals in suits. But wisdom, real wisdom, is born in the soft trenches. In forgiveness you offer too soon. In the dinner you make when you're the one who should have been comforted. In the moment, you finally stop apologizing for being disappointed. The next morning, I wandered downtown Asheville. It's a quirky little city, where street musicians play fiddles in front of crystal shops, and a man in a top hat sells poetry on demand from a rickety typewriter. I stopped to watch him for a bit. He looked up and smiled. "Want a poem?" I considered it, then nodded. "Tell me a word," he said. "Silence," I replied. He nodded slowly, typed for a moment, then tore off the paper and handed it to me. Silence is not the absence of voice. It's the moment a woman stops whispering and starts deciding. I laughed quietly, a warm sound. "You get that a lot." He grinned, "More than you'd think." I tucked the poem into my wallet and went on my way. Back at the B&B, I found a letter waiting for me in Hazel's outbox, forwarded from my old home. It was from Emily. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp and dramatic. Like her, I sat on the porch swing again, unfolded the letter, and began to read. "Olivia, I don't expect forgiveness, and frankly, I'm not sure I deserve it. When you first gave us that house, I told myself we'd earned it, that all the years we spent struggling justified a little generosity. But what I didn't say, what I couldn't admit to myself at the time, is that I wanted more than your help. I wanted your absence. I was afraid of being compared. You had done so much, built so much, and I hadn't, so I tried to shrink you, Move you to the margins of our life so I wouldn't feel like a guest in your story. And I did it in the worst way possible. I lied. I manipulated. I let Brian stay silent because it benefited us both. But silence isn't innocence, and I think you knew that all along. I'm not asking for your love. I'm not asking for your trust. I'm just asking you not to carry the weight of our choices anymore. We were wrong. Emily. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and slipped it under my cup on the table, anchoring it there with the weight of something stronger than closure clarity. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, and I didn't forgive her. Not yet. But I felt something shift, like an old bruise finally beginning to fade. Later that day, I called Elaine. "Guess where I am," I said. She laughed. "You finally made it to Asheville, didn't you?" "Yep." "You always said you would." I smiled. "Well, I guess I finally believed I deserved it." She paused for a beat, then said, "You know, Liv, I don't think I've ever heard your voice sound like this." "Like what?" "Like someone who doesn't owe anyone anything." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I wrote in my journal something I hadn't done in years. I wrote about silence, about power, about how being underestimated was like being wrapped in fog soft, heavy, but eventually lifting to reveal the storm underneath. I wrote that maybe the greatest gift I ever gave myself wasn't the house reversal or the financial protections. It was permission to take up space in my own life again. To be more than a mother, more than a helper, more than a name on someone else's deed. To be Olivia Gardner, a woman with a backbone, not just a heart. The next morning, I packed my bag. I wasn't sure where I was going next, Savannah maybe, or up the coast. Didn't matter. What mattered was that I was driving my own life again, hands on the wheel, wind in my hair. And no one, not Emily, not Brian, not the part of me that once believed I was only worthy when I was needed, could take that away. 4 weeks later, I stood barefoot on the wooden porch of a beach cottage in Tybee Island, Georgia. A mug of chamomile tea warmed my hands. The waves lapped gently beyond the dunes, and the gulls cried like gossiping neighbors overhead. This place was small, simple, nothing like the grand house I once helped build for a family that nearly destroyed me, and yet it felt like mine in a way that house never did. Inside, the windows were open. The salty air fluttered the pages of a book I hadn't yet finished. My suitcase sat, half unpacked, in the corner. Like even my belongings weren't in a rush anymore. I had nothing to prove, no one to impress, and no itinerary except to wake up and follow the light. Funny how fast you adapt to peace once you finally let it in. A few days earlier, I had received the final confirmation from Dalton. The sale of the house was fully processed, my accounts secured, and the fraud case formally closed. Emily and Brian had quietly settled, avoiding court. Their silence was its own confession. I heard through Elaine, who hears everything in our old neighborhood, that they'd moved into a rental 2 towns over. No down payment, no housewarming, no new photos on social media, just silence. That same sharp silence they once mistook for weakness. I didn't respond to the last message they sent. A blurry photo of my grandson, no text, just the picture. I stared at it for a long time. He looked happy, round cheeks, curious eyes, innocent. But here's the truth, they never understood. I could love that child and still not go back. I didn't need to become a ghost in someone else's story just to be near him. If they wanted me in his life, they'd have to earn that now, not with apologies or gestures, but with action, with respect, with consistencies. And I wasn't holding my breath. There's something strange that happens after a betrayal, Like mine, your senses become sharper. You notice the way people speak, the way their eyes twitch when they lie, the hesitation behind a hug, but you also notice beauty faster, more clearly, like your soul is trying to heal by soaking in every color, every kindness, every second chance. That morning on the porch, I watched the tide come in slowly. The water nudged closer with every wave, patient. Unbothered by resistance, I thought to myself, that's how I'll live now, not demanding, not retreating, just present and persistent. I went back inside and opened my laptop. The online store Patty and I launched together was thriving. We had new orders from 5 states. She'd added a little About Us section that made me laugh out loud when I read it. Founded by Olivia Gardner, the toughest lady you'll ever meet, who also makes a mean lemon pie. Our store is built on integrity, humor, and the belief that kindness is best served with a warranty. Patty had also added a quote under my photo: "Silence isn't weakness, it's the space before the storm." She got it. I replied to her message with a simple note: add travel kettles to our inventory. I've got wanderers in mind. She sent back a heart emoji and a photo of the store's front window now painted with a cheerful blue trim and a new welcome sign that read, "Still reliable, still here." That night, I walked down to the shoreline. My feet sank slightly into the wet sand. Every step a reminder that the ground beneath you can shift and you'll still stand. I reached the edge of the water, the waves gently sweeping over my toes, cool and clean. I whispered a quiet goodbye. Not to anyone specific, just to the old version of me, the woman who stayed quiet to be safe, the woman who signed forms without reading, the woman who equated usefulness with love. She'd served her purpose. Now it was time to live for me. I turned around and walked back toward the cottage, the stars blooming like tiny promises above my head. As I reached the steps, I paused, looking back once more, not at the past, but at how far I'd come. And then I went inside, turned off the lights, and let the waves rock me to sleep. So, if you're still here with me, still listening in the quiet, thank you. This story wasn't just about betrayal, or stolen money, or family gone sideways. It was about voice, about reclaiming it. Too many people, especially Mamcha, spend their lives accommodating others, quieting their instincts, sacrificing their needs for peace that never quite comes, and sometimes we do it for love, for children, for spouses, for the illusion of stabilities. But silence isn't always peace. Sometimes silence is where you find your power. I learned that through every bank statement I didn't check, every photo I left hanging too long, every moment I said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. And I learned, too, that it's never too late to change course. You're never too old to take your name back off a deed. You're never too late to start protecting what's yours. You're never too far gone to say enough. And you don't owe anyone an explanation for reclaiming your life. So tonight, as the story settles and the lights dim, I hope you're reminded of your own strength, your own worth, your own permission to say no, to walk away, to begin again, to live for yourself, fully and without apology. You don't need their approval. You only need your truth. Now, close your eyes. Let the world fall away for a moment. Let your heartbeat slow, your mind rest, and your spine straighten with quiet pride. Because you, my friend, are not weak. You are the calm before the storm. And storms, real ones, don't need to shout. They arrive, and they change everything. Good night.